Hi guys, welcome to a new lesson of React. Today we are going to talk about props, how to use them, how to send props from parent to child components, how to use prop types, and how to use ReactJS. So let's get started. We have here the select with options, which does the filtering. The users, we map the users and we show them in a paragraph. So in React, there is the responsibility principle, which means that each component should do one thing. So we need to separate the logic into components. So for example, this field set should be inside the filter component, and this paragraph should be inside a user component. So we can reuse them. So let's make a user component here. User component. If we will have more than one line, we will need to return an object with this HTML. And now let's use this component here instead of this paragraph. So the user here, and we send the key and the index from map. Now it will render this user here. So we need to pass every object data from inside map to this user component. So we need to use it like an attribute. Let's say user equals to the actual object here, this user object. So now we send this object inside this user component. So let's console log this here. Every data we send inside this component, React will bundle it, and it will bundle it into an object, these props named by convention. So if you console log it, we have this user object inside the props. We can send, for example, an image URL, say a placeholder. Let's take a placeholder. And now we have the user and the placeholder for the image. We can see these props and the components with this extension, React Developer Tools, which I totally recommend it. If we go, for example, in a new project and you don't know where the components are placed or what component is the one that you are looking at, you will see it here inside this extension, and you can see the props also, so you don't actually need to console log it. So I totally recommend it. Okay, so now that we sent the data inside the component, let's map this. So we will use an image with a not and props.crc. Let's destructure this. So we have the user and the URL from the props. Now we'll use it like this. And now we'll use a paragraph and make a ternary. If user exists, we will show the name. If not, we won't show anything. Say here name and age. If user exists, we will show the age. If not, we won't show anything. Okay, so now we mapped the data we sent from the parent component. We have the prop types now. The prop types we can use to check the props we sent from the parent component, and we can make them mandatory. So for example, you go on a new project and you use a component, right? It will throw an error if you don't send the mandatory props. So to do that, we will need to name, for example, we want to make the user props mandatory here. The user will be, it's an object, as we can see here. See object, and we have this is required. So now if we won't send the user inside as a prop inside this component, it will throw an error. So we will know that this is mandatory. This is very, very useful. And the other one is default props. So for example, we forget to send this URL for the image, the placeholder. So let's make a default one. Let's put a default URL. Now if we don't send the URL from the parent component, it will show the default ones. But if we send it, it will replace it. This has priority over it. Also, the props are immutable, so you cannot mutate them, you cannot change them. The only way to change them is to set the state from the parent component, and it will re-render with the props changed. I will do a video about prop types in the near future, so we can explore all the features it has. So for the ReactChildren, we will use containment. Some components don't know their children ahead of time. So for example, if you use a dialog component, you press delete on a user, it will show a pop-up, and it will need to have a content. For example, do you want to delete this user? In order to send this from the parent to child component, you will need to send inside this user an HTML element. For example, in our case, let's show a title user data. And now we can access it here inside the component with props.children. If we send an element inside here, it will show it. If not, it won't show it. Okay, so now it will show user data. So we can change this however we want. And now for the class component. Let's make a class component. User class, for example. Let's delete some of the life cycles. And now let's use this user class inside the user list component. Okay, user class. User class. Put the key. So now I have the user class component. So let's send the props here, the user object. Inside the user class, we have the reserved this.props. So for example, we have, let's console log this.props. The props that we send will be available through this.props. We have here this.props. So now we can map again. So props are data that we can send inside components. So React will put them inside an object, and we can make dynamic components. So that would be it for this video. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any questions, please address them in the comments. Bye bye.